Hello, all you Lawsome listeners. Matt Smyers and I just wrapped up a conversation with Colleen Joyce. She's the CEO of Lawyer.com, and this was a high energy conversation. I love her mind just when it comes to running a business. She has incredible history in the legal profession, and she just speaks to the rapid change that we're all living in right now. And we talked through just some practical things on how she would guide just mindset and action as a business owner right now, and ultimately how she's leading Lawyer.com. Matt, what do you feel the listeners are going to pick up on this conversation?
Yeah, like you said, she brings so much energy and insight to the discussion. I really like when we talked about the mindset of the consumer right now when it comes to hiring lawyers. She's got tremendous insight in that regard. And then on top of that, from a law firm perspective, how do we lean into the new consumer mindset, the consumer that is coming to the conversation with a lot more information than what they've had in the past.
You all will enjoy this. And if you haven't subscribed to the Lawsome podcast, we encourage you to do that. We're talking with business leaders, owners of law firms, and really industry innovators within the legal profession every single month, and bringing practical tips and strategies for law firm owners. So enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Lawsome episode. And I'm your host, Tanner Jones, with my co-host, Matt Smyers. We're kicking off this episode with Colleen Joyce, CEO of Lawyer.com. Today, we're talking about scaling trust in the digital age, leadership, AI, and the future of legal search. Welcome, Colleen.
Hey, guys. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Wonderful. Doing great. Thank you for joining us. Let's dive into kind of big picture. Who is Lawyer.com? And then what inspired you to take on head leadership there?
Sure. So who we are? Well, we help consumers find lawyers. When you need a lawyer, where do you go? Lawyer.com. So we have this powerhouse brand that we've been naturally growing into over the last decade or so. And it's been an amazing journeys of ups and downs, and then back up again and then back down. As we learn and as we navigate, we're trying to always reinvent ourselves. And with the birth of AI, well, I think now every day we're trying to reinvent ourselves instead of every year. So it's been a big shift.
That's great. And you've been with them, if I understand correctly, since 2009. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So I actually started working for our parent company. And when we put the domain up in 2012, we really thought the internet wanted to be free, right? So we threw up a directory, and then all of a sudden consumers were calling and lawyers were calling. And I was sitting in a room by myself, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? Like, let's Google it. Like, what is customer service? How can I stand out amongst these giant directories in the industry? And we leaned heavily on customer service. And I think that's really part of the foundation of how we got to where we are today.
You mentioned the change and the evolution in all of this recently, and Tanner famously says what we do is like trying to paint a moving train, right? It's constantly changing and evolving. And I'm curious, what have you observed just in the last couple of years, specific to the consumers and how they search for and find lawyers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think now you're seeing a little bit more of an educated consumer because they have information at their fingertips, right? And before, they would call in and say, I don't know what I need. This is my problem. And now you're seeing a little bit of a shift saying, okay, this is my problem. This is what I think I need, right? Now, we're not lawyers. We don't give any legal advice. But I think with the birth of AI, you're giving consumers power of information, right? That's not to say that they're going to solve their legal case on their own, but they're educating themselves more because it's easier to do that now. And I think that that's amazing for both the consumer and truly for the lawyer as well.
I'm curious, you obviously have incredible history within the legal profession, especially in the specific kind of exclusive realm of, turning consumers into potential clients for lawyers. But what's one misconception, or maybe a few misconceptions, consumers may have about finding legal representation in today's environment?
Yeah, I think it's hard. The typical person needs a lawyer every 7 years. So it's a little different, right? If you're in the medical space, you're used to going to get your physical every year. So you have that knowledge of, okay, I know this is what's going to happen. I'm going to walk in, I'm going to see the nurse, then I'm going to see the doctor, get my paperwork, go home, right? And you're used to that. You're building a knowledge base. It's very unique and different in the legal space because you're going in green, right? You don't know what to expect. And you're really relying on the law firm to kind of step you through that process. And I think, again, back to the birth of AI, at least now maybe you have a little bit more information going into those meetings, but it is very unique in the sense that now nobody really understands the legal process. I never did until I had to personally go through it myself. And I work in the industry.
Let's shift gears, if we could, away from the consumer perspective and tell us, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that the lawyers and the law firms are facing today when it comes to growing their practice, especially with, all the changes and innovations in tech, AI, as we've already mentioned?
I think, and it's not dissimilar to the issues that we have with growth or maybe that you guys have, right? It's where do you start, right? And what's your plan? I think the biggest mistake is not having a plan. A wise man once told me, hope is not a business plan, right? I hope this works. I hope this. No, don't hope. Strategize. So I think what lawyers are seeing more so now is they're coming in with a growth plan, right? And they're saying, okay, how are we going to handle intake? What does that look like? That's our front line, right? What is that like? What is our plan? How do we improve that? And kind of tying in AI to this, it's, yeah, how are we going to use AI? There are so many amazing platforms, software technologies out there. It's very hard to determine what's going to work best for your firm. So our best advice is try as many as you can to see what works, because that's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned intake specifically, and going back to the prior point about the consumers coming to the lawyer, to the law firm, armed with more information, more educated. How do you see firms responding to that? This reminds me of when consumers first started to walk into car dealerships armed with a lot more information than they used to have, right? It changed the way the auto industry had to sell cars, honestly. So what are you seeing from a law firm perspective in that regard?
Sure. And to that point, people are still buying cars, right? And dealerships are still selling cars. I think you take the positive spin on it. So yes, people are going to be better educated and maybe miseducated, right? Maybe that's the case. But you're then getting a more qualified person through the door. Isn't that what every law firm wants? You're not going to have the tire kicker or the person who may or may not need a lawyer. They're coming in saying, this is what I want. Man, I would love leads like that for our, who wouldn't love that? So I like to see it on the positive side. And like you said, people are going to still need to buy cars. People are going to still need to use lawyers. It's just a shift on how we get there.
Yeah, I think that, if a consumer comes in with a preconceived notion about their case, right, that's an opportunity for that lawyer to educate, right? And to let them know that everything they read perhaps on Chat GPT may not be accurate. But at the same time, I think you make a great point. It is an opportunity for them to lean into that.
Yeah.
And you're right. All of our firms want, the qualified cases.
Totally.
And so this is, in a way, it's filtering that to some degree. I mean, if you have somebody searching, about their catastrophic injury, and what lawyers can serve them best, and with a case like that, that's helping to apply that filter before the consumer or the potential client even picks up the phone.
Agreed, 100%.
Colleen, I'd like to take it back a few years. I'm interested to know, especially if our listeners to recall this, but Lawyer.com took the journey of bringing in Lindsay Lohan as a spokesperson, which I think is just such a fascinating angle and very creative. But I'd be curious to know what led to that. Naturally you're stepping out, making a big splash in the industry, and that talk about that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a time where everybody really lived in their lane, right? Nobody was doing anything outside the box. Don't kill me for saying this, but legal was stuffy at one point, right? I think we've all lived through that. And we thought, hey, why don't we do something a little different? We're not a law firm. We're a technology company that just happens to live in the legal world. So we sat down, we started brainstorming, hey, how can we make an impact in this industry with such a monster brand name? So we said, well, why don't we try a celebrity spokesperson, right? What would that look like for us? We saw what it did with Priceline and William Shatner, right? So how can we take that and parlay it into legal? And we were very lucky enough to connect with Lindsay, who was absolute dream to work with. And to this day, we've got great communication, and it was a great experience for us, and we learned a lot. And, like everything, we run as a startup. You try 9 different ideas, hoping that one is going to actually work. That worked. And then we said, okay, great. Now what's next? That's
great. Yeah, I'd be interested, naturally you made the reference of stuffy, and I don't know that anybody would, deny that. We've lived through that, especially television commercials, double truck ads and the yellow pages. It's what we've all experienced. And no doubt there is definitely a new layer of creativity being added to the legal profession. I think it's a great thing. It's going to force more competition and creative competition. But I would ask, what transferable experience or lessons in that did you learn that could be applied to a law firm who may be, wrestling with a little bit more conservativeness in that?
Yeah, I think that the internet has a very short attention span, right? I think I have a very short attention span, us consumers do. So there's really no harm in trying anything. Yeah, okay, great. If it goes down in a blaze of glory, well, there's no such thing as bad press. And I can guarantee in 2 weeks, everyone will forget about it. I do think for lawyers, though, it is a little challenging to play on social media, and even in the review space, which I know we've talked about. It's very difficult because if I got a DUI, right? I did not, but just in case I do, right? I will find a great lawyer and they will help me. However, I'm not going to go post to my whole network, oh my God, John Smith was the best DUI lawyer I've ever had, right? So I think that lawyers, law firms struggle in that sense where law is such a private matter that people aren't outwardly talking about it. So I think that's why you've seen such a burst of personal brands in the legal industry, because you're able to push your personal brand on social media more so than your consumer stories.
What advice do you have for attorneys or entrepreneurs building a business in this competitive and ever-changing environment?
We said it yesterday. If we took 3 months off, right, and we came back in 3 months, not that we would, if we came back in 3 months, everything that we would be working on would probably be different because of the birth of AI. So I think the best advice for anybody is be agile in this space and always be learning. Find out what's out there, see what's working. Talk to your fellow coworkers, talk to your fellow lawyers. We're a huge fan of collaboration is the new competition, right? Go say, hey, John, let's go to lunch. What's working for you? What's not? But I think in this day and age, I'm sure you guys would agree, you've got to always be changing and moving and adapting.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice. I also think there's some value. We had our friend Ken Hardison on the podcast recently, and he talked about the value of still being a good trial lawyer.
Yeah,
and how that is it's becoming a lost art. And with everybody being so caught up in AI and the technology, all of which is important and we can't ignore. But the way he said it, it's almost becoming a lost art, and it's still critical to running a good practice.
That's, I feel like, phenomenal advice, because everybody is so hot on the hot buzzwords. But at the end of the day, a lawyer still has to lawyer. And you can't lose those skills.
That's right. And you referenced earlier just the power and importance of customer service for your business, but also for legal. And as this intake journey continues to evolve, that truly is going to be the differentiator. People still make decisions with their hearts and back it up with attempted logic. And so that is it's a major opportunity for law firms, and we're grateful for you shedding light on that important topic. Any final advice or things to share with our listeners, Colleen?
Yeah, I say, get out there, get on all the LLMs and learn as much as you can, because this industry is changing so fast and you want to be a part of the change and not get left behind.
What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Yeah, so we send out a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn called the Fast Five, where we talk a lot about what AI is trending, kind of what's going on in the industry. And I'm always reachable at Colleen@lawyer.com.
Thanks again for joining us, Colleen.
Thank you guys so much for having me.